Okay, good noon. We are right at noon. Everybody, welcome back to the Njpm Carl Kandelowski Webinar series for 2024-25. My name is Bruce Matez. I am the person who coordinates and moderates the webinar series. I'm the past president of the NJPM, and I'm very excited to be getting back to this and starting this series again. As many of you know, this webinar series was named after Carl Kandelowski prior to his passing in order to honor him for the work that he did in moving this webinar series forward and keeping it going during COVID and really actually kept us going during COVID for quite some time. I'm going to give you a brief introduction and then turn it over to our presenter today. And also that'll give a few other people a chance to log on. First, please keep in mind that this is being recorded. The general schedule for the webinar series this year is posted on the website. We are generally doing this on the third Monday of every month from noon to 1. The exceptions to that are November, January, and February. There is no webinar in November. We'll talk about why in a second. And the January and February dates were moved to the fourth Monday because both the third Mondays are federal holidays. We're not having a webinar in November because our NJPM annual conference is on Friday, November 15th. And we would much prefer everybody attend the conference than this 1-hour webinar on Monday. You can register for that conference on our website, njpm.org. You can attend it either in person or by Zoom. In person will be at the Rutgers Labor Education Center in New Brunswick, which is immediately behind the New Jersey Law Center off of Riders Lane in New Brunswick. If you have any questions about the conference this year, feel free to reach out to me, to Barbara Silverstone, our wonderful executive director, Michelle Cresty, or Suzanne English. We're all part of the committee that's putting that one-day conference together. Our next webinar will be on December 16th. It is how individual and family therapists can be helpful to us as mediators. The presenter is a marriage and family therapist named Carly Cohen, who I've known for a number of years. And she's going to talk about how therapy and referring people to therapists can be helpful to us in our mediation practices. Anybody who is looking for CLE credit today, I will announce a code at 12:30 and at about 12:55 for you to include. It will be one code for the entire hour. And then you will receive, if you paid for and signed up to receive CLE credits for this webinar, you will receive an email from Barbara with the evaluation and attendance form. It's an online form, so you just fill out the attendance form online, you input the code, and you will receive a certificate of attendance by email probably very, very soon after you complete the evaluation and the attendance form. Please, however, understand that this is a very new process for us with the CLE credits. So please be patient if there are glitches. I promise you we will make sure that you get whatever you need, but there may be some stops and starts and glitches along the way. And lastly, if you have any questions or comments that you want others to hear, or you want Scott to answer or respond to during the webinar, please put your questions in the Q&A. Please don't put it in the chat. Put it in the Q&A, and if need be, I'll interrupt Scott and ask him the question, or we'll save them until the end. There will be about a 10-minute period at the end of this where he will take questions directly from everybody. And I already see that Bob McDonald has his hand raised. So, Bob, I'm giving you a chance to talk. Go ahead.
No, that was accidental if you see it. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. Let's see. All right, there we go. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce, I'm going to let Scott Orr introduce himself, actually. He's our presenter for today. He's going to be talking about mediating the holiday schedule. Thank you, Scott.
All right. First of all, I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you for asking, Bruce. Carl Kandelowski helped train me in this process, so I'm honored to have something in his name and to help back to our small community. I appreciate everybody who is here today. Hopefully you find this somewhat knowledgeable or informative. If not, I'm sorry, but you can always feel free to reach out to me via email or phone or what have you. So jumping right into it and jumping right into my introduction first, I guess, I have a very unique sort of perspective on how I got here. I have been a lawyer since 2000, but I used to practice sort of corporate work. Then I went through my own divorce and I realized how little I actually felt in control of my divorce. And I think I wound up sending everybody else's kids to college except for my own. So after my divorce, I wound up sort of hanging my own shingle and first started mediating and then started sort of representing slash litigating and had my own practice. And 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, had the benefit of forming Torchin Martel Orr with my two esteemed partners, David Torchin and Brian Martel. And we're a law firm here in Bergen County. We practice all facets of family law, and I do that myself. But my first love is mediation, not necessarily only because I'm settlement based, but having lived through a divorce, I understand how difficult other avenues may be if we're not mediating. So with that, now I'll jump into it. So when we're mediating in general, all of you know that it's inherently an opportunity to be creative, imaginative, cooperative, even flexible. And there's no such thing as a cookie cutter. If they're going to go to the court mediator, the court will have their own holiday schedule. If they're going to try and do something on their own, they may not have enough information to help them balance what they're going to do for their children and for each holiday. So when I'm mediating, whether it's with attorneys present, they have attorneys, or it's a private mediation, it's really easy to kind of start asking questions and put them in a position to understand that how they've lived their life for holidays specifically may be possible to recreate or get as close as they can to it. Although one size doesn't fit all, I try and get a good understanding of where they are. Normally, when they first come to you and they've already consulted with you or you've begun some mediation process, there's likely a holiday that's coming up around the corner. And it's sort of a situation where you can express them, hey, what are we doing for X that's coming up? Have you thought about that? You know, and let them talk. Bring it to them. Oh, we hadn't thought about that. Or I don't know. What do you suggest? Of course, is the biggest thing we get in mediation. And then you just have to kind of continue to sort of fish information from them. But sometimes that's an ability to gain some immediate trust and rapport, is to talk about the next holiday. Like, we know Halloween's coming. When they have younger kids, that's a big deal. And if they're not getting along, or if they're living in two different cities, maybe we can walk them through that process, or Thanksgiving, etc. So with the holiday schedule, I tend to talk to them about how this is their opportunity to create whatever they want. And I give them a holiday schedule that I've created, and I explain to them that they should work on this, perhaps individually or on the kitchen counter, or they should fill it out and send it to each other. And they should work through it as much as they can without me, but we try and do 1 or 2 holidays together so they can see what I'm talking about. And anytime there's a sticking point, Don't fight, don't argue, stick a pin in it, and we'll bring that to mediation. And the reason I think they can do that is because we don't have to sit here and do what they already know, right? So it's not only a cost saving to your clients, but you have them cooperatively working together to try and create something. Obviously, we mediate couples who may not be able to talk to each other. So in that instance, I say, hey, go home, fill this out, send them back to me, or bring them both to the meeting, and we can go over them together. So with the schedule itself, it could be equal, it could be rotational, it could be split, it could be non-specified, and we'll agree to it, although I hate that. It could shift, it could combine, et cetera, et cetera. There's really no set answer. But what I normally do again is I kind of just send them this, or present them with a holiday schedule. You guys have all seen these types of things. It doesn't have every holiday in there, and every year there seems to be a couple new holidays that I forget, but I present this. So we have the times, what's going to happen if something happens every year, or we could change this to notes, even year, odd year. It's very easy to be extremely simple with this, right? So let's go to Mother's Day as an example. So we know, I hope everybody can see this. Mother's Day is going to be mom, right? Nobody's arguing that. But what does that mean? Because it means to everybody that mom's going to get Mother's Day. But are we talking about the full weekend? Are we talking about the Saturday night? What are we talking about Sunday night? So what I ask them to do is walk me through what you think. Because if it's not Mom Sunday, right? Let's assume they have rotating weekends, and it's Dad's weekend. What does Mother's Day mean? And then we reflect, what does Father's Day mean, right? So although it's simple to say Mom gets Mother's Day, what does that mean, right? So we don't want Dad to do a flyby with the kids and throw flowers out on the lawn at noon. We want some significant time for Mom on Dad's weekend, and vice versa for Father's Day. So we walk them through, we talk about what's your desire and what's the reality, right? Is if they're mediating, this is an opportunity for them to be reflective. Also with holidays, I tend to talk about special events. You know, what doesn't exist in my calendar that may exist in your calendar? I mediated a couple that their child had survived cancer. So one of the holidays we had was, they called it their blood holiday. And every year on that holiday where it was confirmed that their young child no longer had cancer, was cancer-free, they were a family of 5, and we had in there that the core 5 would go out to dinner with each other and celebrate. Okay. Now, look, maybe the parties move on, maybe there's new kids involved, etc. They can always talk about that, but this was a core event for that party. And a lot of people, especially with younger kids, when you're talking about these holidays, they say, oh, we'll all go out together. And that's great. But conceptually, that's aspirational. So you want to put in there, it's aspirational that we'll all go out for each of the child's birthdays or whatever the case may be. But in the event we can't agree, then this is what happens. Okay. So I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place. But the bottom line is we want to systematically go through things. We want to get to a point within the holiday that we're going through every one of these dates and figuring out what we're going to do. So if the couple has shared these with each other, if they shared them with me as the mediator, great. If not, and we're going through this together, again, I'm going through this document with specificity. It's a harder word to say than read. And I'm being as clear as possible. And what I explain to them is, this is your rule book. This is your go-to document when you don't agree. We're hoping you always do, and we never have to go through this, right? You're putting this in the drawer and you're just figuring it out. So if Thanksgiving was Mom's, but Dad's sister's coming in from Seattle to surprise everybody for this Thanksgiving, then hopefully you can create something that's just modifying it or trading or whatever the case may be. So even though it lists even years Thanksgiving Mom, you're in a position where Dad's going to get it. So maybe you double up next year, etc. the more cordial you can have your clients through this process, the better off it's going to be for the children. And I think that's the most important thing. I've had people get through this entire thing in a half hour. I've had people spend 4 hours on Christmas Eve, Christmas morning, despite me wanting to absolutely, scream. But it happens. So the simplest thing to do is to kind of just start with some sort of alternating thing. Right. So I'll have it in this year, even years, you have it in odd years, and we flip flop. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day can sometimes get confusing. So I start with the beginning of the year. I ask them also, I also ask them to gather their school schedules for their children. Obviously, they may be switching schools. I don't know what the story is, but as long as we have that schedule, we can see how we match up, because maybe they have a Diwali as a full day off. Maybe the school doesn't offer Indigenous people / Columbus Day. So we want to get a calendar that makes sense and is consistent with not only what the parents have been doing, but with the children in general. So New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, obviously New Year's Eve this year is an even year, but New Year's Day is an odd year. So we want to make sure that we don't incorrectly label these mom, dad, and then one of them sort of have New Year's Eve and New Year's Day if we meant that we're flip-flopping these 2 nights. It can get a little bit confusing, right? Because does New Year's Eve go into the next day? Is it at 12? The more detail we can put it in there, the better. We also in general should be discussing with them, how do you guys see transportation happening? How do you see these exchanges happening? They'll say, what do you think? And I'll say again, you can be as flexible as you want, but this is our rule book. When there's a problem and you got to reach into that drawer, what do you want to see? And what I tend to tell people is the person that's gaining their parenting time should be the one that should be picking up the children or going to get the children, because you'll find that if it was the other way around, the person's that's losing their parenting time, it may be late or maybe not as incentivized to be there on time. But if you're getting your kids, you're going to be on time. So I tend to say that. When you look at these sort of holidays with the asterisks, these first couple, more Martin Luther King Day, for example, there's lots of holidays that fall on a Monday, especially the federal holidays. So are these holidays actually important to your clients, or are they working? What's their work schedule? What's the situation? Sometimes with these types of holidays, with the Mondays, it may be just as simple as whoever has them the weekend prior has them into Monday through Monday, and the exchange will be on Monday evening as it would have been on Sunday evening or Monday or at school, whatever the case may be. And sometimes that's easiest. Now, it can be a problem if, let's say, they're with dad and mom has every Monday, Tuesday, and dad has every Wednesday, Thursday, then all of a sudden dad has an extra day in there. So if that's the case, when's the exchange happening? Because if Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday is Monday, and we are going to make an exchange, when are we making that exchange? Because normally on Monday, the exchange would likely be at school. So we don't have school. So what are we doing? Are we doing the exchange on Sunday night and then one parent's losing an overnight? Do we do it on Monday morning on the way to work or from work? Or, how do we figure that out? So you want to really walk them through all of the scenarios. Happy to do so if needed, but it's kind of self-evident, right? Is it going to be at the same time that drop-off would have been, and the person gaining the parenting time has to pick them up from the other? If they both have early work and they would have done before care, what are we doing there? Or is a babysitter involved, etc. You just walk them through and you lock in that sort of situation. Normally, people don't like to lose any parenting time. So, the rollover from whoever has the weekend into the Monday, you'll get a lot of, well, that could mean that I'm losing all these Mondays throughout the year. Does that add a level of complication? Potentially. But again, if they're getting along enough, you can sort of balance that out somehow, somewhere. Okay. So those are your Mondays. The President's Day, is it the day? Is it the weekend if it falls on the Monday? Sometimes kids have off for President's Week or spring break or both. So we got to figure that out. A lot of sort of stuff that I like to say is, if nobody's going away, then let's figure out let's go with the regular schedule, the regular parenting schedule, whatever they had attributable to the week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. If one of the parties is going away that week, then we may have, an even and odd type split for President's Week. So maybe we do this and we do this, and, we put in if neither, whatever language use, are intending to go away, then regular schedule. So in this situation, heading into the odd year 2025, dad would have this. If he is intending to go away with the children, you'll have in your custody parenting agreement that he's got to inform that mom within a certain amount of time, present certain details, etc. If dad's not going away, but mom is going away, and she's going away without the children, let's say, then the week's on dad. If she's going away and wants to take the kids, then maybe it's something where you say, okay, well, even though odd is dad's year, we're going to just have some sort of written, email, text, whatever between us. They don't always need to bring in the mediator, the lawyers, that say, mom's taking President's Week for 2025, which is an odd year. So dad's going to get 2 years in a row as first option, whatever that is. And you walk the clients through those types of things. If Passover and certain holidays are not applicable and there's no day off from school, then you simply just delete them from the calendar. If it's something where Good Friday is not celebrated and the kids have school, you just put regular schedule. Again, with Mother's Day and Father's Day, having lived this life, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's extremely important to talk about with them at any time, what do we want our kids to see? What situation do you want for your children when they become adults, when they get through this? And I'll often tell dads and tell moms, I don't care how much they dislike each other at this point, that they've got to put on a show for their children, right? And you don't talk about the divorce, you don't talk bad about the others, but what's often forgotten is we can actually do good things for the others. And Mother's Day, when they finally get to a point, they're like, we don't know what to do. What should we do? I'll say, okay, so if it's dad's weekend and it's Mother's Day weekend or Mother's Day, it seems like an aggressive stance to give the whole weekend to mom, because now we're sort of playing Jenga with the rest of that month, but she's clearly going to get Mother's Day. This is after I've talked to them about what normally happens for Mother's Day, because if they say, oh, we're at grandma's by 8 o'clock, that may have a different result than we don't really do anything. So in the situation where they don't really do anything or they're with mom, what I say is, okay, dad, it's your weekend. This is what I'm recommending. Again, I've seen this work in the past. I'm not telling you what to do, but how does this sound? Dad, you get up with them in the morning and you drive over to the florist. You have them pick out the flowers, you pay for the flowers, you bring them to mom's house, and you either let them off at the curb, but preferably you're walking them to the front door and the kids are presenting mom with the flowers. Yes, it's obvious you did not want to get her flowers, but what do the children see in that scenario, right? They see dad taking his time and his money maybe, and taking the time to pick something out for their mom, an honor and respect type of thing. So reverse, when it's Father's Day and it's mom's weekend, I say, okay, probably if you're in Bergen County, nothing's open, so you can't get him a tie, but does he like a, Taylor ham, egg and cheese sandwich? Sorry for those in the South, pork roll, egg and cheese sandwich, whatever it is. But again, trying to take that discipline of what can you do to show your kids the respect and appreciation, if not love, that you had for their other parent. I think it goes a long way, even if you have to grit your teeth doing it. So, those types of things I think are important. So that's Mother's Day. Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, there's usually a July 4th weekend. So those to me are normally alternating holidays. And it usually starts with the Friday after camp or after school and continues however long you want, but I usually talk to them about having that continue through the Monday evening into the Tuesday where the regular parenting time resumes. Labor Day, it's usually starting the first day of school. Well, not usually, but it can be. So if your kids are really young, what are we doing in general for the first day of school? If you have a situation where they're usually at one house before every weekend before school starts, then perhaps for that Labor Day, you want to do the same thing for that Monday night so everybody's equipped. But again, it's going to be fact specific and where they are. Everybody may have desires, but what's the reality? So if mom works in New York City and has never been there for day one, and dad's been home with the kids and takes them to school, and mom says, I'd like to be there for the first day of school, and dad says, you never have before, our job as the mediators is to kind of, I wouldn't say cut that off, but clearly remind them that we're in a new normal. We're creating new traditions and new types of things. And we can talk to mom in that situation, say, are you going to be able to do this? She says, absolutely. Just then you go back to your training and say, okay, let's get confirmation on that. Let's talk to your manager, your boss, and let's figure this out. Going back to the schedule again, I kind of just continue to go through this. And this is if they haven't agreed to these things on their own. July 4th, again, we have to decide, is that a day or is that a weekend? Sometimes July 4th obviously falls on a Monday or Friday. It can be easy. Sometimes it falls on a Tuesday or a Thursday, but sometimes it falls on a Wednesday and nobody gets a 3-day weekend, or the fireworks are this, or the fireworks are that. Luckily, there's fireworks in a lot of different towns and they're usually not on the same day. So you can talk people down off the ledge if they're not in agreement that they both can be there with the children for the fireworks in the town where they used to live, or one of them's living now. There's usually another alternative. And I think that's important when mediating these types of holidays, is to talk to them about the new normal. Which kind of leads into Halloween, which, believe it or not, can be a pretty contentious thing. And like parents that are trying to really fight for Christmas morning to see Santa come down I guess you don't see Santa, but to see the gifts because Santa came to our house. There's only a few Halloweens where it matters. My kids are 23, 21, and 17 right now. 2 of them are out of here, and one of them is a senior in high school, but I don't think I've seen him since the summer. But I remember Halloween being very important to the kids, and obviously that's a one-day trick-or-treating. And how you're going to work this is how the parents want to decide this, right? So again, try and put the parents, in the perspective of the children's eyes. Try and understand that the kids may want to have both parents there. If the parents vehemently say we can't walk together, maybe there are 2 kids. One walks with one and one walks with the other. It's very easy to say, okay, you have the kids from after school until 5, and then I have them 5 to 7. But if they're really young kids, I promise you, they're not making it at 5 o'clock. It's like 8 houses and out, and they better be 8 kind of row houses. So you're going to know your kids. And I always also tell them that, guys, this is a short-term challenge. And this is something that I'm hoping you're going to be able to work through. I also say, let's say one of the parents is staying in the marital home and the other one's moving to a town that's, I don't know, next door or 10 towns over. Bottom line is, kids like to trick or treat with their friends. They like some familiarity. And if you're really thinking about this from the kids' perspective, it's probably in their best interest to be with their friends and in their neighborhood. So what does that mean? Yeah, I know you moved only a couple towns away and you want them to understand their new town and all this stuff, but this may not be the forum to introduce them to the neighbors. So again, how do we divide this? If you have one kid and that kid's very young, again, this may go to the grin and bear it type thing, or it may be like, okay, we walk block to block, or maybe we alternate Halloween. One parent gets them even years, one parent gets it odd years. with the rest of the holiday schedule and parenting schedule, it's very important, no matter how contentious they are, to try and bring them back to what their idea is for now and for the future. And I often say to clients, whether it's about a holiday schedule, a weekday schedule, or just getting a long schedule, is it's very easy to think that we're fighting to get this done, that you guys are boxing to get Christmas morning or to get this. But what we're trying to do is have you both come to an agreement that not only is for the short term, but that can be modified in the midterm, so that you're able to work together, so that when this little kid who doesn't even know what Halloween is all grown up and getting married on his or her own thing, that you're both sitting at the same table together, whether you have significant others or what have you. That also ties me back to significant others, because, you know, you guys have all been there where somebody says, fine, we'll split this, but I don't want his girlfriend there, or she can't bring her boyfriend or her husband. And again, you know, we sort of try and thrust this back onto them and for the kids. Look, a boyfriend or girlfriend probably shouldn't attend these things, but if it's a long-term type relationship that's already been proven itself out, we've got to understand what does this show the child if you're excluding somebody that's an interest for the other, and how long is it that you'd have to grit your teeth? I know it's a lot to ask, but I'll ask them often, would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? Because you can't have both sometimes. And fighting to keep his girlfriend or his fiance or his wife out of this picture may actually wind up hurting you more in the long run. So, you know, I get it. The kid's young, doesn't know this exists, whatever, but you know, we got to think long term as to what we're doing here. In New Jersey, we often have this sort of teachers convention thing where it's Thursday and Friday, where the teachers go down to Atlantic City if they want for some boondoggle. I have no idea why those days are even off still, but regardless, they are. What does that mean? You know, if you go skiing with the kids, you used to go on a ski trip. Let's alternate that. So one party gets them, you know, this year, then you get them the next year. Or, you know, Thursday's my normal day and we follow the regular schedule. Or, you know, you just walk them through the scenario, have it sort of write itself. You're doing a disservice if you're just saying, we'll flip-flop this, since you got Thursday, he'll get Friday, and because you're not walking them through scenarios. And part of our job is just to kind of get a deal done, but it's also to walk them through, because hopefully they'll never see you again. We've taught them how to create something within this, or the finances, the parenting schedule, the support, so that they're able to talk to each other and co-parent. So if these situations sort of don't follow this schedule, let them work, let them figure it out. But sometimes people are really dug in, as we know, and understand, okay, Thursday's my day no matter what. Okay, so then what are we doing if it's this? What are we doing if it's that? Some of these holidays may not apply. Again, they may be different ones. Thanksgiving is another important one, right? What have you normally done? Okay, so you've gone to his mom's house for Thanksgiving. What time does she do Thanksgiving? Okay, she does it at 4 o'clock. All right, I know you want to go to your mom's house now for Thanksgiving, ma'am, but what does your family do? Oh, we don't really do anything, but Friday we have leftovers. Oh, okay, so let's walk that through. So, you know, sometimes people want something so badly because the other person wants it, and that's sort of their hook. But again, if we're putting ourselves in the perspective of the children, perhaps we're able to answer our own questions. But Thanksgiving itself, the kids get off Wednesday, they're back on Monday. Tell me how this is going to work. You know, or do you go away? Well, we used to go to Connecticut for the 4-day weekend every year to go to my parents, and they're expecting this to continue. Okay, well, I'm very sorry, but unless the other party agrees to, it's not going to continue anymore. You know, so let's walk this through. Do we want this to be Connecticut every other year? Do we want to see if we can touch on Connecticut every year for 2 days? Do we want to, whatever the situation is, we walk through. And if the other person is fighting against it and, you know, shaking their head or saying they've never done this, they've never had this, you know, it's up to us to kind of walk them through and remind them, you know, no eye rolling, no head shaking. And we're trying to be flexible here. And, you know, this is a non-traditional family at this point. We're talking about 2 different households. So how do we sort of help the children and help both of you to get both what you wanted? Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Keep going, just because we're about halfway through, I just wanted to give the code. The code for CLE is BARK, B-A-R-K, BARK. Thank you.
Actually, let me just say, when you put it in the evaluation form, please make sure you use all uppercase letters, all capital letters for BARK.
The court has a schedule that's a little bit different than this. It's much less robust. It's going to walk you through just the main holidays or the federal holidays, and if they're going through mediation with the court provided mediator, it's going to be a lot less detail. It's going to be mom, dad, dad, mom, dad, dad, mom, which they think is great. But again, if we're really trying to avoid problems, my personal feeling is the more details we can create without overcomplicating, the more clarity we provide to this if they're not getting along, because they can always go back to their rule book, if you will. Okay, so before I get into Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, we kind of passed over Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is day off of school. Again, another reason to have your school calendar, because both parents may not be Jewish and say Yom Kippur doesn't apply, but it may be an interesting thing to just touch on and say, okay, well, let's look at the logistics as to what happens. If Yom Kippur happens to be on a Wednesday, sorry?
You're sharing your email, your Outlook with us instead of the
probably
calendar.
Probably not my best idea, but thank you for bringing that up. So let's see, where am I? Did this one work?
Yes, that's it. There you go.
All right. Any of you can answer any of my emails, that would be great. As you can see, I've been on this for about 30 minutes and have a full screen of emails, so that's a disaster. But anyway, getting back to religion, you may have parties that aren't Jewish, but on Yom Kippur, like I said, school may be off. So what are we doing in that scenario? If that would have been a day of exchange, how are we doing that? It's a good opportunity to talk to them about logistics. You also may have a situation, I'm going to stick with two generalized religions, where one party may be Jewish and the other party may not be Jewish. And, what are we going to do? And in those situations, I'll say, what have we traditionally done? And it's not that it doesn't pop up, where they used to have a really nice Christmas morning together, whether, Jewish or not, on one parent. And all of a sudden, because of the divorce, the one parent says, you're not even Christian, so Christmas is mine. And, you kind of let that sort of sit out there. But the truth is that if we're thinking about the children, maybe we can walk them through that scenario, because we don't want those types of statements that dismiss the effects that these holidays have had on the children, right? You say something, your kid, oh, Christmas doesn't matter to daddy because he's Jewish, so I have Christmas every year. Well, Christmas may matter to the children. I mean, it may have some credence there. So what do we do? But if they don't care, then maybe the Jewish parent may have importance to Hanukkah or Passover. Maybe they get those days go with dad, regardless if dad's the Jewish one. But in general, you kind of walk them through the process. And yes, of course, it makes sense from the outside that the Christian parent would get the Christian holidays and the Jewish parent would get the Jewish holidays. But it is important in my mind to at least understand how it's been done in the past and how we want it done in the future, as opposed to some matter of fact sort of designation. He's Jewish, he gets the Jewish ones, I'm Christian, I get, because the kids, may have some, again, going back to bringing flowers to mom, or a Taylor ham, egg, and cheese, or tie to dad, again, it sort of connects them back to family type things. Okay, so Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, like I said, some people are very clear with that, and some people take forever on that. What's the tradition? Well, we always went to his house for Christmas Eve. That's when they opened the gifts. And then we went to my mom's house Christmas morning, because that's what we do. Oh, great. Well, that may be an easy answer here. How does this work in practice? Are we going to his parent? Is dad taking the kids to his house Christmas Eve? And do they live local or do they live far away? Is it something where we're going to make the exchange that night? Or are we going to do it early in the morning, et cetera, et cetera? Every parent, no matter what religion or whatever, wants to be that house where the kids walk down the steps, see the presents, and can't believe that Santa came. Sometimes the parties get along great, and hopefully we're moving to a situation to help them to do that, where one of them may stay in the family home. Perhaps, I guess, again, it's aspirational, but both of them can be there for Christmas morning if we're agreeing it can be on this house. And I often tell them, I said, guys, we're trying to work this year, next year, maybe the year, but if things change and you can't agree on them, that doesn't mean you can't bring them back and you can't come back here and try and get something that makes sense otherwise. I also talk to them a little off line here with the schedule and talk to them about Christmas gifts. If we're talking about wanting to see Santa, we're at an age where maybe they don't have a bicycle yet, or maybe they wanted some other big gift, where again, if we're acting collectively for the mind of the children, then maybe we're both parents are buying the bicycle, and it makes sense for them both to give the gift at whatever home they're at, so as they can be there and see the expression. Obviously, if we're in a situation where they're not getting along, we have workarounds for that too. So if in my example, a kid's getting a bike, they're at mom's house in the morning, kid comes down, sees he's got a bike, so excited. And then there's a trade-off at noon where dad comes, gets the kid, maybe you could take the bike to dad's house, which is always a thing, right? If it's a kid's possession and it can travel back and forth with the child, even better. We want to try and avoid a situation where they're one-upping each other. So, this kid got PlayStation here, but he got the Xbox there. And, hopefully we're in a position where the parents are communicating. Child's birthday, again, we talked about sort of the aspirational way that we can try and do this. They're all going to go out together for dinner or whatever the case may be. And if they decide that's not the case, then the parent who has the parenting time, that's clear, but then the other parent can have a 2-hour block for dinner from 5 to 7, whatever you may be figuring it out. That parent would be not only picking up, taking them out to dinner and dropping them off, or maybe they get them from school and have them until dinner. Whatever the case is, you're going to try and figure that out. If there's multiple children, what are we doing in that instance? Are we just taking the child's birthday, whose birthday it is? Are we taking all the kids? Which usually leads into a nice conversation of, if we're getting along here as a non-intact family, as a divorced couple, and you have multiple kids, maybe the goal is, even though it's dad's weekend, they're at soccer and all three are there, mom could take 2 of the kids for lunch and then bring them back, whatever the deal is. Again, we're trying to get them less about, this is my time, stay away, and understand that it's all the kids' time and we're just trying to deal with it. Mother's birthday, father's birthday, how has this worked in the past? Again, but normally we want to try and give the kids some time to see their other parent for the other parent's birthday. And again, using that concept I spoke about before, maybe you get the kid a card, the kid could fill it out, maybe there's a gift. I'm not trying to spend each of their money, but it does help to do those things. There's some funny things that can kind of happen. I put other specify. So, I've divorced people where, for instance, Mother's Day, a mom will say, well, they all know that Mother's Day is a day I don't want to be with the children. No offense to them, but that's my day to get pampered. Or a party will say, this is great that we have a vacation schedule with the children, but what about if I want to go away without the children? And so I've added things in mediation. Each of them have a week that they can choose to kind of go away without the kids. They don't have to tell them where they're going, but the other party's kind of responsible. If the other party can't do it, then the party that's going away has to find childcare, et cetera, et cetera. But there are enough of those people out there that, oddly enough, will say Father's Day is when I want to go play golf and I want to be without the kids. So we have to build that sort of in. When I also talk about other, please specify. We talk about special family events. What if the grandparents have a 50th, or the aunt's getting married in Texas? These aren't necessarily holidays, but there's some things that you can specify as family events. I also sometimes like to be creative. I'm not gonna lie, most of the dads take me up on this stuff other than the moms, but for instance, dad went to Ohio State, and if Ohio State is ever in the national championship football game, I get the kids that evening or that day, no matter what, because he wants to paint their faces and watch the game together. Or it's usually around sporting events. I don't know why, but those types of things, you can talk to them. It sounds silly, but they're fun. And they kind of get a chance to kind of wink at each other, and then the mom may come up with something just as far-fetched. If this ever happens, then they're mine. Okay. But it's an opportunity for them to have things so that there's not conflict in the event these things happen. Again, vacation schedule, you're going to work out, which is different than the holiday schedule. But usually there's breaks during the school year, and then there's the summer. So what have you done traditionally? How do you want this to work? How do you see this? Oftentimes you'll get where maybe one or both of the parents are first generation, or not even first generation. They moved over here and most of their family is overseas. So historically, mom and the kids have gone over to the UK for 6 weeks every summer. That may not happen anymore, right? Now it may be a different situation. Even though dad was okay with that in the past, there may be a different interpretation of what that may mean. So you walk them through and you talk about it, and how we can best figure this out. And as a lawyer, you can talk to them and say, hey, look, if this is something you're going to fight over in court, I don't think the court's letting you go 6 weeks without seeing the children. They didn't go 6 weeks without seeing the children in the summer. But maybe we can figure something out, or every other summer you're going to do this, or whatever. This calendar, I think, came when Carl and Anju and Anna Maria Patella were teaching me back a million years ago. There's some modifications that you would make to it, I would make to it. But again, my goal in doing this with clients in mediation, it's hopefully amicable, is to make these as detailed as possible. You're putting times in, you're putting who's driving, or you have a catch-all. The party gaining parenting time has to pick up. You have different things, of course, within your custody and parenting time agreement. If you're going to be late, let the other person know, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's pretty much what I had to say regarding holidays. To me, holidays is sort of your low-hanging fruit and your best way to kind of build trust in the process. It's a lot easier than starting with the weekly calendar, because holidays are separate and distinct, and sometimes we can back ourselves into the weekly calendar from here. But new traditions are always made.
All right, Scott, thanks. So we have about a little over 10 minutes left. There was one question in the Q&A from my partner, Gary Borger, who asked, how do you handle religious holidays for parents who celebrate holidays that are not your typical civil or Christian holidays?
Great question, Gary. And, obviously you go back to the document and you add in whatever those holidays may be, Ramadan or Diwali or whatever. When you're talking to parents, you're going to understand what their normal schedule is. What have you done in the past? I may not know what I definitely don't know what I don't know. So talk to me, walk me through certain traditions, walk me through certain holidays that may not be here. It's clearly an opportunity for us to walk through the holiday. I think I talked about when one parent may have a Jewish background and want Passover, the other one doesn't. It's similar. They have to be espoused and let me know.
Question, just because I've been experiencing this of late, where I've got people who just cannot agree on what's best for their children for Christmas morning. One parent believes that the children should always wake up in the house that they grew up in, presents under the tree, blah, 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 all that stuff. And the other believes that, you know, we're getting a divorce, they're gonna have two homes and they should alternate waking up each year in a parent's, in each parent's home. So how do you help them work through that particular issue?
Yeah, Bruce, it sounds like you're underwater or in the bar in Star Wars. I'm not sure why, but I can just what you're saying. But look, again, our job as mediators is to try and get them to reach an accord. It's not to tell them one's right or wrong. And what we try and do is express to them how many more Christmas mornings are we actually talking about where there's a reason that matters, and why does it matter? Is it because of the Santa effect? You know, there's not too many kids in middle school that are still sort of believing there's a Santa Claus. Not too many 5-year-olds have a lot of cognition as to what happened on Christmas morning. So we're really talking about a finite period, and we're really talking about you know, one of them sort of not losing the magic and thinking that the magic should always happen at this house because it's always happened here. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll walk it through, and you know, I'll ask the other party, I'll say, how do you feel that this person says they want it at their house every morning? Well, that's not fair. Okay, what's not fair about it? Well, why should they? Okay, well, how can we make it fair? What's the level of fairness to you? Because again, we're only talking about so many years and so many times. What if we're talking about a 5-year period, what if 3 of the years were there and 2 of the years were with you as opposed to alternating, and we lock this in? So we just try and walk them through the scenarios. I find whether it's in mediation or representation that a lot of the conflict is about the fear of the unknown. And if we can try and deal in actual measurables and try and walk them through, then they recognize that they're really not arguing for that much. Now, if you know, the grandparents come in every year from Venezuela, and you know, they bring amazing Venezuelan chocolates from Santa. You know, we may have a workaround that we have to create there, but at the end of the day, we're trying to create a new normal. So just because it's always been in one place doesn't mean that's how it has to continue.
It's sort of like a follow-up on that is like at some point, do you show them what the county court's holiday schedule looks like if they don't resolve it? Like, because in those circumstances, typically they're alternating kind of stuff.
Yeah, I talked to him. I said, the court's really not going to get into the details here, and here's your best case to do it. Again, if you could do it on the kitchen table, or you can do it and send it to each other instead of paying me and just bring me the problems, great. But if you're going to go through court, they're just going to be, I don't want to say lazy, that's not the right word, but they're just going to alternate and flip-flop, and they're not going to take the time to go through things that are as important to you, and they're certainly not going to get into the details. So again, going back to that Mother's Day, I've literally had a client where it says, you know, Mother's Day is with mom, and the dad like does a flyby, throws flowers, beeps, waves, and keeps going. They were with mom. It was for a minute and a half, but they were with mom. I know that's not what we're trying to create, and we don't want to fight against that. But again, the more detail we can create, I'm not trying to I talked to him. I was like, this is not analysis by paralysis. But again, if we can't agree, we open the drawer and we look and we say, okay, it says this. And what does that actually do, Bruce? That, or everybody, that eliminates conflict. Because if you agreed at a certain time that on Christmas morning the exchange is 12 or whatever it is, we're not arguing. Okay. If it says I'm supposed to, we're not arguing. So the more detail, the better. But in general, for Christmas, you know, what are we actually talking about here? What are we doing, and how do we fix that? Sometimes we get lucky, like I said, in one family's Christmas Eve and the other family's Christmas morning. You know, same thing happens, saying with the Christian holidays, with Easter egg hunts and in the morning, and the bunny brought the baskets and all those types of things. Look, I don't want to manipulate the children, but Santa goes to every house and the Easter bunny goes to every house. And so, you know, just because you didn't come down in the morning, it doesn't mean he didn't come last night, or the bunny didn't come last night and leave you the presents. So I promise I'm going to get you here as fast as you can. You know, and even with that, these may be add-ons and outside the purview, but If the kid got a really great present at mom's house and is hugging that doll or whatever the case is, and now it's time to go to dad's, mom and dad, like, it makes sense. Let the kid bring the stuffy over there, and I promise you, I'll bring it back when we make the exchange tomorrow, or whatever the case is. Again, it's about putting the child first. I know it sounds easy for us because we didn't live there, in that, but at the end of the day, when you're mediating and you get people to walk through the scenario and you say, okay, you guys are arguing, let me hold this picture up of your child and have this same argument in front of them, all of a sudden everybody gets a little bit more aware of what's going on.
So just for the people who may not be aware of this, every vicinage, which is mostly just each county, but sometimes there's 2 or 3 counties together in a vicinage, has its own court holiday schedule that typically, if the parties can't agree, the court will impose that county's court holiday schedule on the parties, and they'll be required to abide by that schedule unless they can agree otherwise. And they're all very different, and it's important to note. Sometimes I think it's important to note that to people, like, you're getting divorced in Hudson County, but if you were getting divorced in Camden County, you'd get a whole different kind of a schedule than what you're getting in Hudson County. And same thing is true with Burlington and Middlesex. They're all slightly different in some ways. They're all very different in other ways. You can find those court holiday schedules online on the court's website, njcourts.gov, if anybody wants to see them. So in the few minutes we have left, there's another question from Suzanne English, who asked, do you recommend using Our Family Wizard to help with holidays, the exchange of children?
To me, Our Family Wizard can be a great tool, but Our Family Wizard is sort of that heightened level of communication. If parties aren't good at communicating via text, email, or in person, at least we're keeping a record of it with Our Family Wizard. There's usually one parent that has to plug in everything anyway. It's an additional cost, but I don't recommend it out of the gate. But if there's conflict or disagreement, sure, I think it's a great tool. If they don't use Our Family Wizard, a lot of times it's not difficult to create a shared calendar, or whether it's Google or Cozy or some other thing. But I don't out of the gate recommend Our Family Wizard because it's another cost and it's another app that they have to learn how to use.
Couple of no-cost alternatives, but I also recommend that people use some kind of a shared calendar that everybody has access to, which makes a lot of sense for most people. All right, so I don't see any other questions, and I don't see any other raised hands here. So thank you, Scott, very much for this very informative program. Go ahead.
One more thing, again, we're mediating, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. So, if we can create some space by dealing with the next holiday or event, all of a sudden you've placated them as we continue to do the entire process. So we don't have to have the entire thing done before Halloween or Thanksgiving, but it's very easy to say this is what's happening for Thanksgiving this year, and then we alternate for next year, we build something else. But thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you. I want to share with you very quickly that one of my favorite mediation stories is the couple. We were done everything, and we spent 4.5 hours mediating over Hanukkah and never got anywhere.
It happens.
Because, Hanukkah's 8 days, and they had a schedule where they were each going to have like 3 or 4 days over Hanukkah, no matter what, just based on their parenting schedule. But boy, did they mediate the heck out of micromanaging 8 days of Hanukkah. It was fascinating.
Yeah. It can be very fascinating, but sometimes I'll pull them aside, not in a caucus, but I'll say, look, what are we actually trying to do here? What's the problem? Because this shouldn't take this long. But you call them out a little bit.
Yes. Thanks again, Scott. Very much appreciated. Some of you who are participating, who are looking for CLE credits, again, the code was here for today is BARK, B-A-R-K. I'll reiterate what Barbara suggested before is please use all capital letters when you're putting that into the form, and you will receive if you paid for the CLE credits for today, you will receive an email with the evaluation and the attendance form. If you don't receive it, please reach out to Barbara Silverstone, our executive director. Her email address, if I remember correctly, is executive director NJAP. Or again, that's executive director JAP. Or we have anything again?
And in case people couldn't hear that, it's executive director at njapm.org. You should all receive the email with the evaluation. It'd be great if everybody completes the evaluation, even if you don't need CLE credit. And then if you need credit, just put the code to get your certificate.
Is there a Dropbox or something for people if they wanted to see the schedule that Scott was using?
I think it's the same one that I got from class, like Ken Newman back in the day, which I appreciate. But if anybody wants it, feel free to reach out to me and I'll send it over. No problem.
Great, thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.